Tom, can you hear me? Yeah. Great. So after that brilliant call to arms about reimagining business in the future for the advertising industry, I'm going to talk about process. Oh, yeah, I think I've drawn the short straw there. So in order to try and keep you engaged and entertained, I've gone straight for the cliche jugular, and I've peppered my presentation with photos of cute yawns. But no, actually, I do think that process is really at the heart of this debate about modern briefing. In the research that we did, we heard. Oh, hang on. Oh, sorry, missed the chart. We heard lots of comments like, "How can I write a brief when the answer could be anything from an app to an ad?" That was kind of really the essence of the feedback that was coming back to us. And I think this is symptomatic of the fact that planners and indeed agencies are increasingly working on projects where the outcome isn't known up front, working increasingly open business problems, business opportunities. And as an agency industry, we're in the middle of transitioning from this world where we knew in advance generally that the answer was going to be a TV advert, a press advert, an outdoor advert, an online banner advert. And now we're moving to a world where we're increasingly being asked to solve business problems. And we're being asked to do that in a world of massive disruptive change. And that puts some stress on the brief and the briefing process as we've imagined it for the last 30 years. So I think we need to fundamentally change the framework within which we try and answer these open questions. And what's clear to me is that the planner can't answer these questions alone. These strategic questions that we've traditionally held on to and wanted to crack before we hand over to the creative department, we can't work in that way anymore. That's why I think process is really key to moving to this new way of working. And the problem is that these answers are too difficult for one person, even a small team of planners to solve alone. And then the answers are too complex to be easily documented, certainly in a way that can be documented before the world's changed and the answer we thought was right has already been made redundant. So we need a different process to tackle these things. There you go. How's it going so far? A yawning cat. About 15 minutes before we had the first cat picture. Not bad. So here's a dense process diagram. This is, I think, the traditional agency way of working. I'm sure you all recognise it. In software development world, this is called a waterfall process. Because requirements cascade down from specialist team to specialist team. So what's typically happened is the client team have got together and decided what problem they'd like us to solve with advertising. And they've written a client brief, which they pass through to the agency account management team, who pass it on to the planning team, who do some planning, and then encapsulate that planning, that solution we've come up with in the creative brief, which we pass over to the creative department, who do what they do, and then what they create is a big idea, a definition of what the campaign is going to look like in whatever way they do it. That's passed on to the production team who make the thing. So in this process, the brief is really important. It's a really important document in a process that's all about documentation. Waterfall is all about capturing specifications very completely at each stage, then handing them over to the next team of specialists to deliver against your set of requirements. Now, the alternative to Waterfall is called Agile. I'm sure you've heard of that. There's a lot of talk in the Twitter sphere about it. And proponents of Agile can talk a bit sniffily about Waterfall, like it's the past or it's outdated in some way. But Waterfall is a great process. It's really good at building bridges. It's really good at installing satellite base stations. It's really good at scaling big advertising campaigns. So if you need the next 10 adverts in a really successful series of adverts, this is a great way to do it. So I don't want to be sniffy about it or pretend it's not outdated. I think the key, though, is to use the right process for the right kind of project. And what Waterfall is pretty bad at is solving these kind of open business opportunities that we find ourselves now presented with. So what's the alternative? I'll just pretend that chart isn't there. So, as I said, Agile is the other main way of working. And as I said, lots said about it. And I think probably most agencies in the room are using a bit of Agile methodology. So there are big network agencies getting multidisciplinary groups together in rooms for 3 days to try and crack problems, but then they go back to a more linear process after that event. And I think what we saw coming through in some of the research was a confusion or even resentment about the collaboration being asked of us in this modern world. And in our experience, if you dabble with Agile but don't commit to it wholeheartedly, it actually just creates chaos. You've got to go for it 100%, and that means really understanding what it's really about. Our real Agile is about creative development. Oh, look, the yawning tiger. Real Agile is about iterative development, where requirements and solutions evolve through collaboration between a self-organising, cross-functional team. How many buzzwords can you get in one paragraph? More simply, I think it's got 3 components: who does the work, how they do it, and what they actually do. So, who does the work? This is, look, I can't talk for everybody, but this is how we're trying to implement Agile at Albion. So, who is the Agile team? We're trying to implement Agile by basically getting rid of the creative department and that notion. Instead, we've got this pool of talented, T-shaped people. So people who have a deep craft skill in a particular area, which might be art direction, or copywriting, or design, or code, or strategy, or tactics, or editing, or trends, or psychology, or whatever that deep craft skill is. But we also want everybody in that pool to share something in common. We want them to in Albion's case, to share interests in popular culture and technology and entrepreneurship that are broad and unite that team. Now, when a project coalesces, we go through a process of triage, where we try to predict what the ideal project team would be to solve that particular problem. And then we're writing a piece of software that matches the best available resource with that ideal team and creates the Agile project team. The multidisciplinary, all people who trust and like each other is what we're aiming for, because that's what it takes to work. What they do is go through an iterative design process. So first stage is always a discovery stage, where the team get up to speed, audit existing research, immerse themselves in the worlds of the end user, for example, and then we get into this iterative stage, the first of which would be concepting. At every stage, we're doing live validation with users, we're iterating, constant change. What's interesting for today's debate is these points. One is we're not collecting all the requirements at the start of the project. The very full client brief, the very full creative brief isn't there. The team are going on this journey together. So what that means is the client has got to be a really intimate part of this Agile team. Typically they're one of the nodes in that team. They need to spend a really concerted amount of time with the team, working throughout, coming into the agency, into the project room, and really feeling part of it. So you've got to remove that barrier. Second is the planner doesn't have to do all the mental wrestling up front to try and resolve this really complex web of channel and audience and whatever, all these things that are causing us so many headaches, because the process and the team together can do that heavy lifting. Thirdly, Agile process focuses on the team's shared knowledge rather than the documents. So the brief becomes a little bit different in this context. In fact, it can become very simple, although it is still very critical. It's simply a record of what is the problem we're trying to solve, and that doesn't change throughout the whole process. But also, what's the team's view today on the best way of solving it? And that bit does change. And I'll talk about version numbering a little bit later. So we've got that record on the wall at any time, reminder of what we're trying to solve, and then after one day, what's our best view on how we're going to solve it? And then just a quick note, because I'm sure I'm running short on time. This is what an iterative approach to developing brand advertising looks a bit like. So it draws on Mark Earle's idea from a few years ago about lighting lots of small fires. And it means through that process, we're not aiming for just one answer to the brief. We're going to trial in a live environment many answers to that brief and get an objective read on which one works best. A traditional creative development process is very subjective. Ideas get weeded out by creative directors, by clients, by end users in qualitative focus groups, all of which are subjective and guesswork of one kind or another. So what we're doing instead is create many answers to the brief, put them live in a kind of lightweight, efficient environment, for example, Facebook advertising, see which one makes it, setting hard metrics at each stage. If they pass that test, we invest a little more in them, so perhaps some rich online display, put a bit of media money behind that, see how that goes, and the ones that make it will scale in kind of full premium media. You'd have thought this process might lead to boring, formulaic work, but it's how we recently created a viral video featuring Keith Harris and Orville doing a Eminem pastiche rap. So it demonstrably doesn't lead to boring work. So, to finish up, I think the key message is use the right process for the right job. Waterfall is still great for some of the things we want to do, but if for solving these big, open business opportunities, we need to be using something that looks a lot more like the Agile methodology. Practical tips. I think version numbering briefs is a really small thing, but it can have a big impact on teams. You know, if the first thing you do is write down your top of your head thoughts on what's the solution to this problem and number it version 0.1, that says to the team, try and better this, knock it down. We're going to go on this journey together. It's an act of humility on behalf of the planner. And the second thing, really importantly, is that the title of my talk was about process, but to make Agile work, you've really got to understand it's a philosophy as well. The people in the team have got to want to work in that way. And as I said, it can be counterintuitive to especially creatives who've been to ad school and trained that they're going to be artists. So you've got to think about how best to motivate them. We find this is how they did Nike Fuel Band. Works pretty well. And I think that's pretty much from a yawning baby rat. Thank you.